Good morning, everybody. This is Carl Griffith, the Director of Emerging Technologies at Graybar, and I'd like to welcome you to our G2 Talk webinar today. The presentation today will be about the best practices for deploying and maintaining distributed IT infrastructure. This talk is part of our webinar series we offer each month for our data communications customers. So we're glad you're with us today. Before we get started, there's a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to go over. First of all, I wanted to let you know that if you're one of the first 50 people that signed up and are on our webinar today, you'll get an email, and on that email will be a certificate for a cup of coffee from a large national coffee chain in the United States. So you can get a cup of coffee on us if you're one of the 50 people to be online, first 50 people to be online and stay with us for the day or for the time of the webinar. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon down there for Q&A. I wanted to let you know that during the webinar, if you would like to ask a question, if you just click on that little icon, a dialog box will open up and you can type your question in there. We'll get to the questions at the end of the webinar. You can type a question anytime throughout the webinar. Just hit that little icon, type your question in, and then we'll get it at this end, and we'll go over as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. This particular webinar is worth 1 Bixby credit. So if you stay on the line for the entire presentation, you can download your Bixby certificate right from this platform. Just click on the ribbon. There's a little ribbon icon there, like you see on this particular slide, and you'll be able to download your certificate at the end of the presentation. Lastly, I wanted to let you all know that our G2 Talk webinars are archived on graybar.com. So you'll be able to go back and view the presentation again, or you'll be able to give it to a colleague or a friend. Just go to the graybar.com website, click on the G2 Talk logo, click on the button that says archive, and you can get to this presentation or others. We're very happy today to team up with Emerson Network Power. As a data communications distributor, Graybar works alongside Emerson Network Power to power, network, and secure buildings and data centers with speed, intelligence, and efficiency. And you can visit graybar.com to learn more about our solutions. Our presentation today will be given to us by Enrique Oliveira, and he's the Director of Business Development for Data Center Solutions at Emerson Network Power. Enrique has worked inside and outside of data centers for over 15 years, holding roles in sales and marketing. He's also held roles in product management and product strategy. Enrique is responsible for assisting Emerson sales offices and partners in designing and selling solutions to facilitate the deployment and maintenance of distributed IT infrastructure. Prior to this current position at Emerson Network Power, Enrique worked for Avocent. And prior to working at Avocent, Enrique served as a software engineer for Cyclades, where he developed firmware for console servers and rack PDUs. Enrique has an engineering degree, mechanical engineering degree from the University of São Paulo in Brazil, and he has an MBA from Santa Clara University in California. Without any further delay, I would like to welcome Enrique Oliveira to be our presenter today on this G2 Talk webinar. Thank you very much, Enrique, for joining us today.
Thank you, Carl, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webcast today, and thank you again, Carl, and the Graybar team for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. So today we'll be discussing distributed IT networks, or how some people call it, edge IT. It's really all the IT that happens outside of data centers, in branch offices, retail stores, healthcare clinics, distribution centers, you name it. I guess pretty soon there will be a lot of IT in our homes too. For many years, we saw the centralization of all IT into large data centers. But now, for a number of reasons that I'll discuss during the presentation, we are seeing distributed networks grow in importance. We are seeing retailers beef up their stores with more compute power to personalize their consumer experience and increase their revenue per customer visit. We're seeing healthcare clinics invest in newer technologies, such as voice over IP or digital record retention. We're seeing enterprise customers invest in virtual desktop technologies for all their offices. And we're hearing all the analysts talk about the Internet of Things, with the promise that network devices will be all around us, communicating 24/7, which will create a boom for distributed IT technologies. Let's get started here looking at the agenda for the next hour. I'll start with an overview of Edge IT. I will give you examples of systems that are being deployed at the edge and of all the supporting infrastructure that those systems require. I'll also share some trends and some data research that Emerson has conducted. I'll follow up with a comparison between data center deployments and edge deployments. Most of us are very familiar with data centers. So this comparison will help you understand the challenges faced by people in charge of deploying IT equipment at the edge of their networks or outside of data centers. We'll then start with the meat of the presentation, the best practices for deploying and maintaining distributed IT networks. We'll talk about power infrastructure, cooling, physical security, remote access, and remote monitoring. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you two examples of projects I worked on to give you an idea of how this works out in the real world. So let's get started here with some examples of Edge IT across different verticals. As I mentioned earlier, you don't have to look far to find examples of Edge IT. Every time you see IT equipment being deployed outside of a data center, you are looking basically at an Edge IT deployment. Banking is one vertical that has dealt with Edge IT for many years. Now, banks are investing in automation and telepresence technologies, not to mention the new security systems that increase the amount of IT equipment being deployed at the branches. In healthcare, we're seeing several trends. Large hospitals have long relied on IT equipment to provide their services. However, now we're seeing all those technologies trickle down to small healthcare clinics. There's also a trend of larger clinics acquiring small clinics, right, and rolling out their IT solutions to the smaller clinics. They're also deploying newer technologies, right, migrating from traditional voice systems to voice over IP, or migrating to a digital record storage. All these technologies, all these trends in healthcare are leading to more equipment being deployed in each clinic. Manufacturing. For many decades, manufacturing plants have depended on technologies such as Modbus and RS-485 for monitoring and control. Those technologies are slowly migrating to IT-based solutions, which is another Edge IT application. You're going to start seeing servers and network switches in manufacturing plants more and more. Retailers, as I said, they're beefing up. They're trying to compete with e-commerce. They're beefing up their stores with more compute power to personalize their consumer experience. They're really trying to maximize the revenue every time that customer taps into the store. Right? They're also investing, again, last generation security systems that rely heavily on cameras. Recordings are mostly stored locally, which require large amounts of IT equipment, storage equipment. The applications are endless. I have been working with this particular area of Emerson Electric for the last 18 months. So I'm obviously paying more attention, but try to notice for yourself. Next time you go to a restaurant, look for a cabinet with all their IT equipment used to run the restaurant. It's going to be there somewhere. Sometimes it's pretty easy to spot. It's right there by your table. Some other times it's kind of in a corner, hidden somewhere, but it's there, right? When you go to a retail shop, just look around. You're going to see a point of sale server somewhere and probably a small UPS. at larger retailers, it's harder to find. They usually put it literally in a closet. But if you ask one of the teenagers that work there, they'll show it to you. I tried it at a couple of stores here in my neck of the woods, and sure enough, they open the closet, and there it is, a 2-post rack or a 4-post rack with a ton of cables coming into it and a few servers there to run the store. It's there too. At airports, when you're going through security, just try to peek under the tables. You are going to see a server there, a couple of servers, and you are going to see a UPS system just sitting there, right? So Edge IT is that. It's all around us. It's growing very fast. Now, to get us started, right, we have a few polling questions here just to understand where you, the audience, is coming from. So on the screen, we have a question for you, and if you could help us by selecting one of the options there. And the question is, how are you related to Edge IT? Are you an end user, and you manage or you deploy Edge IT locations? Are you an IT vendor or a distributor, and you sell equipment for Edge IT applications? Third option there, if you are a contractor or maybe a reseller or a system integrator, and you develop solutions for your clients for Edge IT projects, or none of the above. You're just here to learn a little bit more. So I'll give you 10 seconds here. Please select one of the options. And by the way, we're going to share the results of this survey with you right away on the next slide. So let's see if how this worked out. Also, we have a pretty balanced audience in this case. So I guess a quarter of you are working directly with Edge IT locations. A third of you are actually vendor or distributors selling this type of solutions. About a quarter of you are integrators or contractors working on these projects. Well, thank you for answering. This helps us understand your profile, right, and do a better presentation for you. Let's move on to the next slide. And this slide is more targeted towards the resellers and the vendors, right? And it talks about how to find an opportunity, right, for an Edge IT project. So we looked at the examples, right? Here's how you find opportunities, I guess, to develop a project, an Edge IT project. You're looking for a small team that manages a large number of distributed IT locations. This is very common, right? More common than you can imagine. I was actually surprised when I started working on this 18 months ago. I worked with companies that have hundreds of locations across multiple continents, and they have 2 or 3 people in charge of all the locations. So very common, right? You also see that these small teams that manage multiple locations, they place a huge value on standardization and simplification for obvious reasons, right? If their locations are not all very similar, it becomes a maintenance nightmare, right? Very, very difficult to maintain a number of locations if they are all different. So every time these teams are going through a new build or when they're doing a rollout of new applications, that's the time to talk to them about how to facilitate their Edge IT. Some examples, right? I mentioned healthcare. There are a number of healthcare chains or groups of clinics rolling out voice over IP. They need new networking equipment, right? And they do a rollout. So they do two clinics a week or 1 clinic every week. That's the perfect time to talk to them. VDI for the enterprise. You have all these enterprise customers migrating from desktops to virtual desktops, and they're putting chassis of blade servers in all their offices, right? Again, that is an Edge IT opportunity for for making it easier for that customer, for that user to facilitate their lives, right? At the bottom of the slide, you see all the technologies that we can offer to these people. It is basically all the supporting infrastructure that they will need to deploy IT equipment at the edge, right? Along with services. And services, by the way, is an important component of any edge IT solution. As I mentioned, the norm is a small team managing a large number of locations. The small team can't be at all the locations. It's not practical, right? So they need local partners that will help them with maintenance and repair. This is an area that some of you on this call can add a lot of value to the end user deploying and managing distributed IT infrastructures. The next slide will show some trends across different verticals. This table was compiled with information gathered from industry sources and with interviews we have conducted with our customers. The trend is clear. The amount of IT equipment being deployed outside of data centers is increasing, and this growth will be compounded by the new Internet of Things technologies. We are looking at a vicious cycle that results in more IT equipment being deployed at the edge. More and more data is available today from many different sources. All this data is leading to the creation of complex big data algorithms to handle all the data. Big data algorithms are starting to deliver results to businesses that are now investing in ways to gather more data so their algorithms will get even better, right? It is a vicious cycle that is leading people to deploy more and more IT equipment at the edge of their networks, gathering more and more data. The next slide shows the results of interviews with 3 different customers. It shows what applications are hosted at the edge of their networks and the reason why the application has not been migrated to a central data center or to the cloud. I mean, if you've been in the industry for 10 or 15 years, you know there's been a push to migrate all the applications to a data center, right? It's more economical that way. So we do have to address this point, right? Why are there applications that cannot be migrated to a data center? Why that application needs to be local? And this slide talks a little bit towards that. You can see there are apps that can only run locally in each location. Voice over IP, perfect example. Print servers, another perfect example, right? There are other apps such as security systems that could potentially be migrated to a data center. But if you do that, you're going to be transmitting all those video feeds over the network, and you're going to spend a fortune on your network connection for that location, right? So people prefer to run that application locally at the edge. One interesting aspect of this table is the business criticality of the apps that are running at the edge. An insurance firm won't work if they don't have phone or access to the insurance file. A fast food restaurant won't operate without a POS system. And a warehouse won't work without its automation software, right? This business criticality implies that these companies will invest in technologies that will help them minimize network downtime at these locations. And another survey question here to see how many locations you work with. So if you're an end user, please select the number of locations that you are involved with. And if you are a vendor or a system integrator, please select the number of locations that choose a client, I guess, your client, you're helping your client work with. Again, I'll give you 10 seconds here to select an option. Okay, let's see what we got now. Wow, this is a surprise. Most of you are involved with more than 100 locations. Very good. Let's move on here. Some more survey results, some more research that Emerson conducted last year. In this particular research, we talked to 52 IT people that manage remote locations, and we asked them, what are the most important things for you at those remote locations, right? Not a surprise here. The main thing are the applications, right? First of all, that IT equipment is at the edge to run an application. Obviously, that application is the most important thing. A surprise to us was the second most important thing there, standardization, right? Again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. If you're managing multiple locations, lots of locations, like many of you, more than 100 locations, standardization is very important. I apologize for my dog here. So again, going back to that point, right? It's going to be a lot easier for you to manage multiple locations if they all look the same. If they're different, like in a lot of places we visit, it becomes a lot harder. When something breaks, you don't know what's in there because it's not a standard. And it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to take a lot longer for you to fix that. Let's now switch gears a bit and talk a bit about the challenge of deploying and maintaining distributed IT locations. So far, we looked at some verticals, we looked at some examples, and some research data. So now let's put ourselves in the shoes of people that are deploying IT equipment at the edge and try to understand why it is such a challenge for them. And the easiest way to start this discussion is to talk about the data center. Most of us are familiar with data centers. We have worked in data centers most of our lives. So that's how I'm going to start this. And what is a data center? Data center is a place that offers your IT equipment, physical security, power distribution, cooling, and monitoring tools, right? So when you put your server in a data center, you know that no one's going to come around and press a button or pull a cord, right? Your server is pretty safe. That's physical security, right? There's all different technologies that protect the data center from people that are not supposed to be there. The data center will have the proper power distribution. So you're probably looking at redundant power feeds, right? Redundant power infrastructure throughout the data center. You're looking at a industry-grade UPS, a real big UPS, and you're looking at a generator. A lot of times you're going to see 2 utility feeds coming into the data center. So that guarantees that your equipment first is going to be getting clean power, right? The power is filtered. And second, if there is a problem with the utility power, you have backup, right? So your IT equipment is going to be not going to run out of power. Cooling, right? Thermal management. If you put your IT equipment in a data center, it is not going to heat up because the environment is controlled. And lastly here, and what you see on this slide comes from a book, pretty interesting book, but it is old, about 12 or 13 years old. His last item here is a data center has network connectivity. That is pretty obvious today, right? What I like to add to this definition from Rob here is that a data center has monitoring tools, right? If the temperature is too high, you'll know there's sensors all over the place. A data center also has, most data centers today have lights out capability. So the administrators don't have to go to the data center to work on their equipment because lights out technologies are deployed in that data center. Long story short, right? If you're an IT person and you have to deploy a server or a network switch in a data center, all you got to do is walk in, plug the power cables, plug the network cables, and you're done with your physical installation. Obviously, you have to do the logical configuration of the equipment and so on. But the physical installation is very simple, right? Now, contrast that with an edge IT location. That same IT person needs to deploy a server or network equipment at an edge location. There's no power, there's no UPS, there's no generator. A lot of times there's no cooling, right? A lot of times there's no physical security. A lot of times you don't even know what the building looks like, right? There's no monitoring, there's no IT people there, right? It's a pretty big challenge. And if you want to do edge IT right, you do have to worry or plan for all those items, right? And granted, none of those things are rocket science per se, but you do have to worry about all of them for all the locations. And it turns out to be a ton of work, right? Just not easy. And again, going back, it's usually, especially on the mid-size, small-size company, it's usually the IT person who's in charge of this. And the IT person, well, he's an IT person. He doesn't know much about UPSs or about physical security. He doesn't know much about cooling, right? So it becomes a challenge for that person, and we end up with a lot of things that are not right, are not ideal, right? As I mentioned earlier, if I go to a retailer here in my town and I ask the teenager to show me the closet where the IT equipment is, he does, right? That's clearly a physical security breach, right? And it is a larger retailer too, right? That should never happen if you plan your edge IT in such a way that you took physical security into consideration, right? A lot of times, power distribution, people know they have to buy a UPS. So they go and they buy a UPS, but they don't monitor the battery. Right? So you know what happens, right? After 3 years, whatever, when the power goes out, the battery is not working anymore. They were not monitoring that battery, and they didn't know they had to monitor the battery, and they have to replace the battery every so many years, right? So you end up with a lot of deployment that could be a whole lot better, right? And that's part of our job here, right? As vendors, to help those IT people make better edge IT deployment. With that, if you've been involved or if you are involved with edge IT deployments, I wanted to ask you, right? Out of those 4 areas that I mentioned, power distribution, thermal management, remote access, remote monitoring, and physical security, which one of these do you think poses the greatest challenge for you or for your customer? Again, I'll give you 10 seconds to select an option. And while you do that, this is also these 4 areas are the basis for our best practices, right? Basically, what I'm going to tell you on the next slide is you have to plan for those 4 things for every edge IT location. So let's see here. Again, a pretty balanced selection here, but physical security came out on top, and that's absolutely right. It is pretty hard to create a physical security strategy for hundreds of locations, right? All those locations are usually different. They're not standard. So do you put your equipment in a closet? If you do that, who's going to hold the key to that closet, right? Who has access to it? If someone walks into the closet, how do you know, right? Is there a sensor at the door? Are you going to put cameras? It is a pretty big problem there. A lot of work to come up with a good solution. Power distribution. No, that's surprising that power is the least selected there. But okay, well, thank you for helping us with this survey. It is the last question. So from here on, there are no more questions. So let's talk about. Oh, I forgot about this slide. This is also part of the survey that we did, the customer interview that we did. And these are some quotes that came directly from IT people that manage remote location, edge locations, right? The first one there is the best, and pardon my French here, but it's basically a pain, right, to manage those remote facilities. And also, people are trying to standardize as much as possible, right, to make it easier for them to maintain all those locations. All right, so this is the main part of the presentation, and this is pretty much a roadmap, I guess, or best practices, right, for deploying and maintaining those edge IT locations. The first step is what I mentioned earlier. You have to think about every location as a micro data center, right? You have to think about physical security, power, thermal management, remote monitoring, and remote access. If you miss any one of those, you may run into trouble, right? If you miss physical security, I mean, that's a big problem. You've seen problems with security, computer security, all over the news. Target, I mean, every week there's one these days, right? If you overlook physical security, a hacker can easily get your hardware. And if anyone can get your hardware, it doesn't matter what you do in the antivirus or electronic security. Physical access to your hardware, I mean, just ruins everything else. So you have to protect your IT equipment from unauthorized access, right? If you don't do the power distribution or the thermal management right, you're going to be more prone to downtime, right? Let's say you decide you don't need a UPS. So the power is not going to be filtered, right? It's not going to be clean power. So anything that happens, any anomaly on the utility power is going to cause your equipment to shut down or even damage your equipment, which will lead to downtime, right? Same thing with thermal. If you think that you have enough comfort cooling in a certain building and you deploy your IT equipment in there, and it turns out that the comfort cooling wasn't enough, your IT equipment is going to heat up and it's going to shut down, leading to downtime. The last one there, monitoring and access. If you don't have the remote monitoring and the remote access, first of all, you're not going to know when things are not right. Right? If you don't have the monitoring, you're not going to be alerted. You're not going to know until it's too late, which is going to lead to downtime. If you don't have the remote access, that means whenever there is a problem, you have no way of fixing that problem remotely. So you're either going to have to drive to that location, or you're going to have to call your whoever is maintaining the services contracts for you, which both options are going to cost you money, and both options are going to take a long time, right? So you're going to spend more money, and you're going to have a longer downtime period if you don't have that remote access and technology in place. Number two there is to establish repeatable standard configurations. And in my experience, that will be no more than 3 configurations. And be aware, especially if you have locations that are overseas, be aware of product availability and code differences across different regions, right? But try to get to as few configurations as possible that you can roll out to all your locations, right? So maybe you have a lot of people will do small, medium, large, or small and large. Maybe you do a 1500 VA option, 1.5 kVA option, and 1.5 kVA design, right? With all the monitoring and all the remote access built into that. But to try to have as few configurations as possible. Validate your design, and this is very important, right? You're going to be rolling out this equipment to multiple locations. Now, a lot of times you're not going to be there, right? That's going to be done by contractors. So before you finalize your design, bring everything in-house and build it yourself. Look at all the power capacities, look at all the cabling. I mean, cabling seems like it's not important, but it is important, right? If you get to a remote location and you have the wrong cable, guess what? You have to run to the store, find the right cable. Takes time, right? Make sure you standardize. You see all the cabling that you need for each configuration, right? Physical dimensions. I mean, put everything on the rack and make sure it works. Make sure the hardware mounts, you have enough power, enough cooling in each design. The second item here, very important as well, right? We are talking about remote access and remote monitoring. So make sure your design works with your existing tools. Most IT departments will have their monitoring tools in place. There are a ton of those out there, right? So make sure whatever you design for your edge location will work with your existing tools. Make sure your tools can monitor those UPS batteries, right? So you don't have the problem that so many people have with their batteries being outdated. Make sure your monitoring tool will read the temperature sensors in that rack PDU, let's say, or that temperature sensor that you put in that location. And make sure you're getting those alerts, right? Test this all and make that software configuration part of your repeatable standard configuration. And the last piece here is to find a partner, right? If you're doing this, there's a big chance you're a small group handling a large number of locations. Find a partner. It's going to pay off, and there are many companies that do this out there. Find a partner to do the pre-integration for you, the deployment, and the maintenance, right? It's going to be cost-effective to find a partner, and there are partners that cover all countries for you, right? And some partners even cover overseas locations as well. So now this is a summary, right, of the best practices. Let's just step through each one of these areas, each one of the 4 data center areas here. And I think we start with power distribution, right? Some considerations for designing a power distribution for an edge location. Usually, there are 3 things. There may be up to 3 things that you are going to have in this power distribution. A UPS, the power distribution proper, right? How do you take the power from the UPS to the rack PDU and the rack PDU? A lot of small locations, all you're going to see is a UPS because most UPSs today will work as a PDU. They have many plugs that you can use to connect your AC equipment. If your location is a little bit bigger, of course, you need a rack PDU. You need more outlets. And if your location is much bigger, right, you need a busway, a bus bar, or something to take the power from the UPS to several of the PDUs, several racks. Things you have to think about, and this is a big one, right? Inline UPS versus double conversion, right? And if you purchased UPSs before, and if you paid attention to this, you know that the inline UPS is, it's much cheaper than the double conversion, right? It's usually about half the price. So why would you pay for double conversion, right? A lot of people don't understand that. But there's a couple of things, right? Inline UPS is a lot less efficient than a double conversion UPS. I am not a UPS expert, but the numbers I remember is the inline UPS is 70% efficient, and take that with a grain of salt. Double conversion UPS is 90% efficient, right? So if you go with the inline UPS, you're going to be spending a lot more money on electricity bill, right? Because it is less efficient. But most importantly, right, the battery life, right, on the inline UPS is a lot shorter. So you're looking at a 2 or 3 year battery life on the inline UPS versus a 5 to 6 years battery life on the double conversion, right? And it's interesting, if you look at support contracts for inline versus double conversion, a lot of times the support contract for double conversion will be cheaper, right? Because the manufacturer knows it's going to be cheaper for him to maintain a double conversion than it is to maintain an inline UPS. So if you're buying UPSs or if you're planning to buy UPSs, take a close look, right? The initial price you pay for the equipment is not all, right? You have to think about maintenance. You have to think about monitoring that battery and replacing that battery whenever you have to, right? The other important consideration here is centralized versus distributed architecture for the UPS. And this only applies if you're talking about a location that has multiple closets or multiple rooms, right? If you have only one room, I mean, that's not a problem. It's of course centralized. But if you have multiple rooms in the same building, you have options, right? You can either get a larger UPS in the central location of the building, or you can put small UPSs in every single room. I think I can say that if you have the option of going with a central UPS, you should, right? It is more economical. It is easier to maintain. It's much easier to maintain one piece of equipment than to maintain multiple pieces of equipment, right? But it does imply that there will be a lot of work in the building, right, to bring the power from that central location to the rooms. So a lot of times that's not feasible, right? But I think rule of thumb, if you can go with a central UPS, you should, right? Redundancy. How redundant do you want your system to be? Are you going to buy 2 UPSs for every location? That's costly, right? What a lot of people end up doing, IT equipment has 2 feeds. So they put one feed on the UPS and the other feed directly on the wall. So this way, you only buy one UPS and you still have the redundancy. Not the same level as you would have with 2 UPSs, but for a lower cost. And there are some other items there that later you can look into. I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to have to speed up the presentation. Anything else on this slide? Yeah, just about the rack PDUs, right? A lot of these rack PDUs today have monitoring and control. So when you're buying that UPS, that PDU, make sure you'll be able to monitor the power consumption, right? And make sure, very importantly, you'll be able to control the output. Because in an edge location, if your IT equipment locks up, there's only one solution. You have to cycle the power, right? If you don't have a PDU that does that, you're going to have to drive to that location, or you're going to have to call someone who's going to charge you $100 to go there and unplug that IT equipment from the wall and plug it back in. Okay, so that is one important thing to consider. I have this is a duplicate slide, but the graphics on the right are different. I just added this slide here to show you that most downtime in IT is caused by UPS battery failure, right? Again, people are not monitoring that UPS battery, and whenever they need the battery to work, the battery doesn't work because, well, it wasn't being monitored and they didn't know the battery needed to be replaced, right? And the graph on top there shows how many downtime events people had in the last, I think the survey was the last 2 years. So you can see that downtime happens a lot, right? It doesn't happen a little bit. And every time there is downtime, it leads to a company losing revenue or incurring more costs, right? So it is something companies try to avoid. So let's go into the cooling, thermal management now. So this is, in my opinion, it is the hardest area for IT people. I have an IT background, and cooling presents the biggest challenge for me. But there are several things you have to consider, right? First of all, you have to start with the IT load. You have to know how much heat that IT load is going to be dumping into the room. Then you need to understand the room, right, where the IT equipment is going. Is it a pretty small room with a low ceiling or a pretty big room with high ceiling? That influences your decision. And then you have to see how much cooling you already have in that room. And then you have to decide, right? Do you do simple ventilation, which is basically installing fans in that room to bring in more air? Do you use the building air conditioning or the comfort air conditioning because your IT equipment is going to be dumping a lot of heat? Or do you go with dedicated cooling, right? And the pictures on the right show some dedicated cooling that are available today. You can go with those mini splits on the roof of your closet, or you can go with these self-contained solutions, right? Basically, this pod that you buy from vendors such as Emerson that have the cooling built into the cabinet, basically, right? So on the right there, you see a cabinet with a built-in cooling. At the bottom there, you see a row with built-in cooling as well. So those are options that are available to you today. But again, it's going to depend on the amount of IT equipment you have. It's going to depend on the room that you have to work with. And again, things to watch out for. Total cost of ownership. When you start talking about cooling equipment, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into it. You have to take that into account. You can't only look at the initial investment, right? You have to look at all of that. There are cooling with fixed and variable capacity. Again, if you go fixed capacity, you're going to be wasting money on energy because the thing's going to be running 24/7 full time. And look into services, right? For cooling, I mean, especially if you're in IT, it's a lot better to find a trusted advisor, a contractor, or a vendor to help you with it because cooling gets pretty complicated really fast. Next one is the monitoring, the remote monitoring and remote access. So for remote monitoring, you're going to be looking into temperature, humidity. Very important. A lot of times temperature becomes an issue. And I've seen one case in the last year where humidity became an issue for a customer. Right? IT equipment was rebooting and they didn't know why. Turned out to be the humidity at the location. Battery health, and this, I cannot stress this one enough because most people don't monitor their batteries, and when they need the UPS to work, the UPS doesn't work. You have to monitor that battery on the UPS. Right? Going back to physical security, you have to find a way to monitor intrusion. If you're in a closet, put a sensor in that door, right? Make sure you get an alert when anyone goes in. Right? If you don't have a closet, put a sensor on the cabinet, right? Whenever someone opens the cabinet, you get an alert. Monitor the utility power. The utility power goes out, you have to know about it, right? Because the UPS is not going to last forever. The UPS battery is going to last you 5 or 10 minutes. So you have to know utility power is out so you can go in and shut down the equipment. And if you have dedicated cooling, you have to monitor that cooling equipment. For remote access, it's very important that you have hardware level access, right, to your IT equipment at the remote location. What we call BIOS level access, right? It's a serial cable that goes into the IT equipment and will let you access that IT equipment even when the network is down. And then second, and very important, you need an out-of-band way of accessing that location. You know that location is connected to the network, but what if network is down? What do? That's when you use the good old phone line, right, to get into that location, access your IT equipment via modem, and correct whatever is broken. Right. And lastly, for those of you with a large number of locations, you need a centralized monitoring and centralized access, right? You need a piece of software somewhere, probably in your data center, that's going to consolidate all the alerts from all the locations, right? And also another piece of software that's going to allow you to access all those locations out of band whenever you have a problem. The last one here is physical security. I spoke a little bit about this earlier, right? That guy gets physical access to your hardware, you're done. There's nothing you can do about it. They can root into your machine, steal all your data. Oh, they can even steal your server, right? They don't have to log in. They just take the server away. So you have to pay very close attention to physical security. You have to monitor that room if there is a room for the IT equipment, or you have to monitor that cabinet, right? It has to be a cabinet with sides doors, locked doors, and whenever someone opens that door, you want to get an alert, right? So again, physical security, very important. We're nearly running out of time here. I'm just going to rush through these 2 case studies. This one company here in California, they had 140 MDF closets across North America and Europe. These were pretty big closets. They were running 20 kW of power per closet. And they were having lots of issues with UPS monitoring. They were actually not monitoring their batteries. And they were also having issues with the cooling equipment. So what we offered here was a complete self-contained system. So you can see there in the middle, 5 racks. It's not represented here, but the rack in the middle has a pretty large 20 kVA UPS. And on both ends of the row there, you see the air conditioning units. So this system here that we designed for this particular end user can be deployed anywhere in North America and Europe. And all they have to provide is a cold water pipe and electricity, right? So they can standardize all their 140 locations with the same design, right? They can just order it and tell us where to drop ship this. Our technicians go in and do the deployment, and they're good to go. The next example is, okay, this is out of order here. Okay, the next example shows a pretty small deployment. In this case, it's a healthcare clinic deploying voice over IP across 250 clinics, and they were deploying 2 Cisco switches. That's it. They were putting 2 Cisco switches in every clinic. And here's what I designed for them. It's a short cabinet, a 13U cabinet. The cabinet has doors, and the cabinet doors have sensors, right? So if a doctor decides to look or peek inside, the IT guys at the central location will know about it. There's a UPS there with enough power and enough battery to power those 2 Cisco switches. And there is a terminal server on the top there, the blue box, that connects the Cisco equipment and connects the phone line in case that remote IT guy needs to do some troubleshooting on the Cisco switches, right? They can just log in remotely. All this system is pre-configured at the factory, so they can just ship those cabinets out to the clinics, right? And there's not much configuration done on site, right? A quick summary here. Again, just to wrap this up, if you are working with edge locations or if you're helping someone who's doing that, first of all, think about a data center. For every location, think about those 4 items that we discussed. Establish those repeatable configurations. Maybe it's a row like I shared 2 slides ago, or maybe it's a little cabinet, right? It doesn't matter, but just make it standard for all the locations. Validate your designs, dimensions, power capacities, and validate your software too. You want to be able to monitor and access all the IT equipment remotely. And lastly, find a partner, right, to help you with pre-integration, deployment, and the service and maintenance. Carl, I went a little bit over, but thank you again for the opportunity. I'll turn it back to you for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Enrique. I just wanted to remind everybody that you can click the little icon there for your BICSI certificate if you would like to do that. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it in the dialog box right now, and we'll get to as many questions as we can in the few minutes that remain. If you would like an accompanying white paper to go along with this particular presentation, if you'll just type the letters WP in the Q&A dialog box, then we'll send you a white paper too via email. So let's move along to the questions, and I have one for you, Enrique, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, and that is considering the batteries that we're monitoring. What's the easiest way to do that for a UPS remotely? What's the easiest way to monitor remotely UPS batteries?
So it's really going to depend on the infrastructure that you already have in place, right? So if you already have monitoring tools in your own environment, right, and you're comfortable with those monitoring tools, if you're familiar with SNMP, right, and you don't mind configuring those UPS units, I mean, you can just configure the UPS unit to send you alerts to your own system, right, whenever the UPS unit detects battery problems. So that is certainly one option, right? But there are also, you can buy this as a service, right? There are companies that, well, not to sell my fish here, but Graybar and Emerson offer that service. You can buy, it's almost like a software as a service that will monitor your batteries for you, right? And the service go as far as if there is a problem with a certain battery, they'll send out a technician to replace that battery for you. So I think it really depends. If you have the expertise, right, and if you have the tools in place, it's probably more cost-effective for you to monitor your batteries. If you don't want to bother, right, you don't have the time or you don't have the tools or the expertise, right, it's probably easier to pay one of these companies that offer battery monitoring services, and they always do a great job. That's their job, right, to monitor batteries. So you're guaranteed that that battery is going to be there when you need it.
The second question we have has to do with the security implications associated with out-of-band monitoring. And you mentioned that we could monitor in-band, of course, but if the equipment goes down, there's no way to get back in it, so we have to have some kind of out-of-band connectivity here. You mentioned modem access. Are there security problems with this modem access and out-of-band access to the equipment?
I wouldn't call it security problems, but there are some security considerations that you have to think about before you go for it, right? As you know, a phone line is there. Anyone can dial that phone line, right? There's no firewall for phone lines. But what some of the vendors do is to offer features that will help mitigate that risk. So two features that are, I mean, they're old. They're 20 years old, more than 20 years old, but very effective, right? One is a callback. So you configure your modem at your remote location to basically call back a number, right? So every time you ring that modem, the modem answers, hangs up, and calls you back. So if a bad guy calls your modem, great. The modem is going to answer, the modem is going to hang up, and the modem is going to call you back, not the bad guy, right? So this callback feature is very, very effective. The second feature is called one-time password. It is, this technology is also old, but it basically, whenever you use your password, it's no longer valid. So if a bad guy is watching that phone line, right, and waiting for you to type your password, he's going to see that password going through the line because, I mean, it's a phone line. However, as soon as that password is used one time, it's no longer valid. So basically, instead of having a password to log in, you have a list of passwords, right? And you use it one time, you cross it, you go to the next one. Next time you dial in, you use the next one, cross that one out, and then you go to the next one. So long story short there, Carl, I mean, that it is an additional security risk. It is an additional way into your IT infrastructure. But there are some pretty established features there to help you mitigate that risk. And we've seen these modems being deployed by all kinds of large enterprise, banks included. Right? So it is possible to make that phone line safe.
Great. Well, we're right at an hour. I wanted to thank everybody for participating in our webinar today. If you want a certificate, click the blue ribbon and you can get that for your participation in today's webinar. Remember that everything you saw today is archived, so you can go back to graybar.com and you can take a look at this presentation, or you can share it with your colleagues. I want to invite everybody to come back next month. Third Thursday of every month we get together and have a G2 Talk webinar. Enrique, this is outstanding information about working on the edge in a world of the Internet of Things and things getting closer and closer and closer to the edge. Equipment at the edge, not just compute equipment, but other connectivity and communications equipment at the edge is so important. We see that this is fertile ground, and a lot of our customers do as well. So thank you very much for the very timely presentation that you gave us today, Enrique. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.